on we go. Welcome to the Future Leaders webinar talking about building trust in teams you inherit. Today it's myself, Sarah Morgan, COO, and I'm joined by Gavin and Ian, if you'd like to introduce yourselves, and a special guest, Brad.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm Gavin. I'm chief mentor at Future Leaders Mentoring. So I head up the mentoring operation, and we make sure that we are providing the best quality mentoring we possibly can do.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. I'm Ian Parry. I'm the CEO and founder of Future Leaders.
Do you me as well?
Yeah, introduce yourself, Brad.
I'm Brad Goodfellow. I'm CEO of Energy Angels.
Great to see you. We should have some other people here, but I think the fact that it is a beautiful sunny Friday has meant that people have prioritised something else. So it will be an intimate conversation, but hopefully we'll still get huge amounts of value out of it. So I'm going to hand over to you, Gavin. Hopefully other people will turn up and I'll let them in, but let's carry on in the meantime.
You can man the doors, Sarah, that'd be great. And as they come,
Staff the doors.
Exactly right, absolutely right. Well said. Absolutely. So look, well, thanks for everyone for joining today. So the thing we want to talk about before is part of our number of mentoring events we've been running. We're exploring leadership, and one of the key things that we wanted to cover off was around how you kind of start to build trust in teams that you inherit. Because often when you're a leader of people, you come into new business, and Brad, I know you've just taken on this new role as well. You inherit a team, and that comes with an own unique set of challenges that I think it's worth us exploring it today. So I'm open it straight off with the first question, and maybe I'm going to go to Ian if that's okay to start off with. When you've worked with many teams in the past, Ian, what's kind of surprised you most when you've inherited a team for the first time?
Do you know, just so thinking back to some of so I guess there's surprises you get the first time you do this, and then other times after that. I suppose the first time, the surprise you get is sometimes some of the hostility that you feel from some people, and you quickly realize that they might have thought that they were the people that were going to get the job that you sat in. And you quickly kind of go, oh, wow, I didn't realize. So, of course, you've applied for a job, you've been successful in the job. It's not your call, somebody else has made the decision, but then you're in the middle of that and feeling some of that kind of negativity. So you really quickly got to try and understand where that person is, see how you can kind of help in their development journey, and kind of see if you can sort of build trust with them really quickly, I guess, in establishing some boundaries as far as that respect is concerned. Because I think whilst they're obviously feeling some pain, you've got to try and sort of navigate that within the team and not allow it to kind of disrupt things. And certainly I'm remembering team meetings where some of that was could be particularly painful, but also just how you can work together. It may well be that they're in a painful situation, but if they're a senior member of the team and they're adding some value, then how can you work together? How can you sort of balance some of those things out together? So that's certainly, for me, one of the biggest challenges when you go into a new team and trying to navigate the personalities and the talent within the team.
I think it's a really, really interesting point. What you just said about the recognizing that someone might have actually been going for the same role that you've got is a very key point, because you don't always think that way, and it can create that position where you're on the back foot from day one. So you're right, building that trust and almost starting from that's acceptance and recognizing that it's almost not if you're doing. You don't have control over that. That was someone else's decision is quite key. So you've got to learn to work and understand what's the other person's needs are, essentially, and also get over that particular point to move forward. I think it's a key thing. So what about yourself?
I think I've certainly experienced as Ian suggested, and I remember one particular situation where the first time the individual knew that they weren't successful was when they were given my CV and told that I was turning up on Monday and they were to onboard me. So they'd been told they were a shoe-in for the role, and it was like, this is your boss, she's arriving Monday, on board her, which understandably, he was pretty mean to me the first week or three. Um, because also they don't trust you enough to tell you that that's why they're really cross. But I think as well, it's not having, it's part of your onboarding. You find out all of the technical. You can scan for what you think's happening with other parts of the organization, but it's those interpersonal challenges within the team, that these two people don't get on, or these two people are really clicky. So it's really scanning for that politics with a small p within the team quite quickly, to understand that you don't step on a tripwire too quickly and uncover things within the team in the wrong way. Excuse me. I think that's been something that I've really learned to take time to do.
You say kind of politics with a small p. Do you think that getting the dynamics of how a team operates within a wider business level, enterprise
Yeah.
level, the situation comes into play too when you first start a business, or start join business?
Definitely. And, as we all probably are aware, in any role, understanding that and understanding that the picture that you were given in an interview perhaps is quite different from the reality once you hit the ground, and working out, how to gain an understanding of that landscape is really crucial. And that's even harder if it's within your own team that you've inherited, that you're having to get them to work together to produce results as well.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I'm also, Brad, I said to you, you started a role recently, so I won't put too much on the spot. But from your experience, have you got any thoughts or comments on that question about what surprised you when you've inherited a team?
Um, I wouldn't say surprised, but I was very conscious of it. So stepping in as the new CEO, and I felt the weight of pressure of expectation, and to want to deliver the best version of me for the teams, people, 30 odd 35 odd people that, in the business. And uh, I mean, it did help me a bit. I've got a good friend who shared a book with me, and it's basically what to do in your first 100 days. Um, however, I didn't start reading that book until about, I don't know, 3 days before I started. Some of the things it says you should have done before day one, I was like, "No, I don't think I necessarily approve of that." I mean, it depends on what kind of business I suppose you're moving to, like, if you're multinational or something, But
Yeah.
so I didn't think some of them were necessarily appropriate, but it did set out a lot of things, and bizarrely, a lot of it seemed like common sense when you read it. It actually seemed like common sense
Yes,
about how to approach and how to get your initial message across, and how important that initial message was. Which, when you think of it, is actually quite a simple thing to sort of to do and say. Um, but it emphasized about how, getting everyone together to collectively to just outline your three key values or something that you
yeah,
you stood
yeah.
behind. So they got an instant vision of who is Brad, and what does he want. So I did that on day one, which is a bit scary, even for me, and I'm quite outgoing, so I'm not shy in sort of chatting or whatever. But when you've got the owner of the business, who's decided he's going to step aside and be chairman, he's over there, and then everyone else in the entire business, who at that point in time ultimately knows more about their business than I do, even though I've got this energy insider experience and all this knowledge and everything that I'm coming here with. It's a challenging moment. I was quite nervous to deliver that, but it went really well, and by all accounts, and I felt I got some more points across with a little bit of humor, a little bit of an exposure into who I was, and that helped a lot then to sort of start that journey of, um, uh, entering into this place and dealing with all the teams and how they perceive me. I think.
That's really
Does that
good.
make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. When you step in as a leader into an organisation like that being on show, they're looking to see how you kind of act, the values you have. As you said, you're kind of bringing three
Yeah.
values to the front position. It's really because it's really key. There's the company values. Do you align to the company values? Are you going to come in and completely shake things up? I think this probably ties back into kind of how you make your mark versus sort of existing team dynamics. So you've obviously you're running a whole organization, Brad. So your spans wider than maybe someone who's starting, taking their first team potentially, and it's their first leadership position. But I think your point around communication and communicate is fundamental. That from day one you've got to be out there and be very visible and be open and sharing about who you are. So what are people's thoughts about kind of respecting existing team dynamics when you've joined a business which is established, for example, you've walked through the door, you're not starting the business from scratch, you walk through the door, there's a culture, there's a set of dynamics there in the team. How do you kind of balance that with how whilst also, I suppose, making an impact? And maybe Sarah, I'll come to you first on that one.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is starting with listening to really understand the depth of why things are done the way they're done, what's been done in the past, what's been changed recently. Is it a team who are struggling with change fatigue, in which case your approach needs to be different, to a team that have felt really held back or they were stagnating and therefore they're really eager for change? It really asking and getting very curious in your first 4 to 6 weeks to truly understand it, because it can be so tempting. You walk in, you're like, I can see what needs to change, it's obvious. But without understanding that context and really getting curious to what's going on underneath it and why, it's very easy to get it wrong and to upset the team dynamics in a negative way. And I think being really transparent about that as well. And when you start, you've been an individual contributor and it's your first leadership role, there's less of an expectation. But when you take on a new team in a more senior position, y- although you need longer to get up to speed with it in some ways, you're given less grace. So I think being comfortable to be sufficiently vulnerable with the team to say, I don't know all the answers yet. You do know much more than I do. And for us to be successful as a team, I really need you to support me in that. And being brave enough to be that vulnerable is important as well.
I agree. I think vulnerability is a really fundamental word here. Now, Ian, you've also, I've put Brad on the spot about a new job. You've also started a new job recently, whilst you know the business very well anyway. Um, how do you show your vulnerable side when it comes to kind of dynamics of a team, or do you not? Do you play cards close to your chest? That was a leading question. How do you play it?
Well, for many years, for me, leadership was about perfection. So you never reveal anything that you think could be a vulnerability. So you were always happy working whatever hours were needed. You'd be responding to emails at crazy times of the day. You were working weekends. That's what, being the hardest working person in the world. Never sort of suffering with any sort of mental health challenges. Everything was good. And of course, that's just like completely the opposite of normal life, isn't it?
It
And
is.
just because you're a leader doesn't mean you don't have any of those challenges. So um, I definitely learned that didn't really position you very well because your team kind of didn't reveal those weaknesses to you either. And what I learned was being a leader was often kind of creating that kind of safe space for people to share with you. And if they were sharing some of their challenges with somebody that didn't have any of those challenges from their perspective, then they're going to struggle to do that because, as far as they were concerned, you were on a pedestal. You were able to work whatever hours you needed to work. You were able to deliver on what you needed to deliver. You came into work every day smiling, keeping the positivity going. So why on earth would they share any of those things with you? So I definitely learned that sharing some of those challenges, absolutely sharing where you've messed up in the past, and how the mistakes and the things you've learned from those mistakes, I think is really important in gaining people's trust and just creating a real human interaction where people get to know who you are
Mm.
and why you're here in the job that you're doing, what they can expect from you,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
what your job is like. I've been talking to a couple of people recently that have had new bosses. And the thing that occurred to me was if there'd been an expectations conversation at the very beginning, then some of the frustration both sides of that relationship would have had wouldn't exist. So there was a lot of style conversations where people felt like they were being micromanaged because they weren't trusted. And actually, it was just a style thing. That person loves getting into the detail, loves really being able to help people. Um, but the other side of that, they were feeling not trusted and as if they couldn't get the job done. And then months later, when they had the conversation, they aired both sides of that, and they were like, "Oh, okay, so this is different." And I just
Mm.
couldn't get away from the fact that if you have those expectation conversations up front about styles, how you like to work together, what expectations you've got of each other, it kind of nips all that stuff in the bud from the beginning, doesn't it?
It does, and I
Mm.
think
Absolutely.
what you said there is quite interesting to me because when I've started roles as I've got as became more senior and worked with different teams, it works both ways because look,
Mm.
I work very, I'm an early bird. I'm a lark. Okay, I work best first in the morning. I come in early, set my day up, and I have most of that golden hour available to me between whatever time it is first thing in the morning to get stuff done and prepare. If I'm interrupted, that's absolutely fine, but it puts me on the back foot. I almost need, I don't operate well until I've had like 3 cups of coffee and I've got that out of the way. That's my routine. And the reason I often share this when I first start a new job, saying like, by all means, come and knock on the door, but don't expect me necessarily to be Copus Mentis till that point. It's absolutely fine. So there's that setting up, not setting boundaries, but being really clear about expectations. Okay. It's so how that's how I like to work. How do you like to work?
Mm.
How can I match the way to get the best out of you? How can I understand how you like to operate? We
Mm.
all have, as you said, Ian, we all got personal lives. We've all got different ways of working, and we've got families. There's all those things to consider that we're not just the person in the room in front of us. There's all the things around us that makes us as humans. So the more you understand about an individual, the more you can create that woven fabric of how the team should operate when you know all there's different threads that need to be pulled.
Mm.
That's a really stretched analogy, yeah, absolutely, I'm sure. So, Sarah.
And then I was just going to build on that slightly. It's then understanding, okay, so this is how each individual works. Are there tensions or capabilities then that are shared? Because some people do it in one way and some people do it in a different way. Can you use that as an opportunity to uncover again what the problems might be with the dynamics? Or actually, everyone's working beautifully together. And as Ian was saying about his wanting to be, everything's perfect. Although initially thought of the Lego film, I then remembered a brilliant line from Heathers. If anyone remembers the film Heathers, which is if you were happy all of the time, you wouldn't be a human, you'd be a game show host. And I don't think anyone wants to be led by a game show host.
No.
So yeah,
I
some vulnerability around that helps.
Yeah, definitely, and good analogy. But I would prefer you singing the Lego song. So
Everything is awesome.
Have we ever worked for any leaders who haven't done that in the past, who haven't shown
Oh,
vulnerabilities, who've had the mask on, the leadership mask on really tight, so they're hard to read?
oh gosh,
That's
yes.
that's an open question. I'll go to Brad first of all and put you well, we put on the spot this time because we're trying to be human leaders if we can, but everyone has a
Yeah,
style. You said the word styling. What are your thoughts, Brad?
I'm sure I have. I'm trying to pin down in my mind who the actual leader would be, but yeah, I've worked with some bosses in the past who don't let you see much of their actually them, and um, past employers that I've worked for have helped me understand and sort of not be afraid of that, because I guess in years gone by, and maybe at times gone by, that was more acceptable. That it was I remember an old director of a business I used to work for many years ago. There was a clear dividing line between management and staff, and friendship should never cross over the boundaries of that. And so that's what I believed for many years. I thought that's the way that had to be, and I always struggled with that because I'm a people person, so I like to get to understand people. I like to understand people and know them, and part of that essentially means drinking coffee with them or something, and finding out about them, and talking about football and talking about rugby or Formula One or the mutual things you have together. And I guess the so part of that is not having that strict boundary there, but just being able to blur that boundary, but still being able to be the leader, and still have I suppose the authority and the respect, I suppose. But part of that comes from them seeing you, though, doesn't it, as a person?
Absolutely. Yeah, completely agree. Do we think the days of the ivory tower have now kind of gone then? You hope.
I'd like to
Sadly
think so, yeah.
not.
What are your
I
thoughts,
think there are
Sarah?
a lot of organizations that still have that mentality. And I think there's an increasing tension then between the majority of an organization who are exhibiting different ways of working and wanting to be more human, and the old guard, or the people who still have this perception that psychological safety is about being soft on poor performance, that command and control is the way to go. Um, and it's so interesting because everyone I talk to in any detail is not wanting to be in that old space anymore. And yet, so many people I talk to are struggling because they are experiencing that still in their workplace, which is heartbreaking.
It is.
Yeah,
Things have
yeah.
moved on.
It's true, actually. I think when I'm thinking last year about some friends I've got, who think that I'm probably from a soft era. That's probably the way they'd probably put it. They'd probably put it a bit more harshly if I was talking to them. But yeah, so I think they don't believe in some of the things that I take quite seriously, and passionately, and believe in, and exemplify. Flex working is one. I think there seems to be this sort of kickback now at the moment with the flexible working, sort of this hybrid working sort of format. And a few of my good friends just think it's nonsense. Working from home means you're basically doing nothing. Basically, that's what they equate it to, and I equate it to good management. If you've got trust and management, and you're able to observe that somebody at home is doing nothing, then that's an issue you deal with when they're in the office. um, Not to pull the rug and to say that no one can work from home.
Absolutely. I think my perception is it tells me a lot about that individual and their own work ethic. If they believe that if you're working from home, you're doing nothing. And
Yeah,
maybe they're the ones that should be in the office being observed.
yeah.
It's a good shout, Sarah. It is. Ian, did you have anything to add on that one? The ivory tower.
I guess I was thinking, and I guess I prefer to kind of give a more of a positive future look on it.
Mhm.
There was so we're in Mental Health Week at the moment, and a few years ago I was working at an energy company, and rather than doing the typical, hey, we've got cakes today, or we have mental health first aiders, what they decided to do was have the most senior person in the business talk about their mental health struggles. So they like put it on paper and said their story, and they were not sort of insubstantial struggles. It wasn't, sometimes I miss my bus. There were some real serious things going on for them. And they shared that both kind of in writing out to the whole of the business and verbally in kind of stand-ups. And for me, that was just like a great example of leadership, because that changed the conversation around the whole business then where mental health was concerned, because people instantly felt more comfortable sharing. Because even now there's still a massive challenge in people sharing things and being able to say, well, I'm really struggling at the moment. I'm desperate, yet I don't want to mention mental health to my employer because I don't know how they're going to feel about it. Because in the past, I've been managed out or I've not
Mm,
got promotion as a result of challenges I might have had. So I just wanted to call that out as a massive kind of positive story that, there's plenty of that that goes on too.
Yeah, it's very
mm,
strong. Again, pulling it kind of back to that the discussion point we're focusing on around the taking on a new team and inheriting a new team. That's an interesting point as to when that happened, when that individual felt comfortable enough to share such a positive story and a positive personal experience. And would is that something that you do very early in your, when you inherit a team? How open do you be for that exact reason that it could be misconstrued or misunderstood or create a perception? I don't want to ask kind of the actual date, of course, Ian, but that's something we all need to be aware of when we're trying to, how open do we be over what time?
Yeah, but I think as leaders and people at the top of the business, you've got the privilege
Mhm.
of not being judged in the same way, I think. So you
Yeah,
have
mm,
really got the opportunity to be a bit more bold, a bit more brave in sharing that stuff. Clearly, you want to remain professional. It's not about sharing dirty linen and things that are
mm,
far too personal. And it's your story to share, I think.
yeah.
yeah.
So I might not share that story in the same way. This person did, and it was their story to tell. And of course, because they were the most senior person, they used their privilege in a really positive way, I thought.
Did you or do you believe that it started to break down barriers within the organization? You said the
Without,
conversation started to open up.
yeah, without a doubt. And interestingly, we ended up saving a number of people from losing their jobs that were going down a road of mental health illness and sickness and hitting the typical HR sort of
Trigger points.
trigger points, that we were able to sort of be a bit more flexible, and they were a bit more open in the challenges they were having, and a number of people stayed with the business because of this openness around mental health.
Mm.
That's good. That's a good point. Really good point. Um, so the question I've got though, which is quite interesting, is when if you have we ever been in a situation where we've unintentionally sort of damaged trust early on with the team we're inheriting? And whilst you're thinking about that, I've got an example of a team that I took on where it was completely unintentional, but when I looked across the kind of the estates and the various areas that I'd taken on, one particular team was running very well. It seemed very stable, running well, producing, and I thought, okay, I don't have to worry too much about that team at the moment. My focus should be over here. So focus on the area which you believe requires most attention. By doing that, I almost created a situation where the team that I didn't have the eye on, thinking, then is he not bothered about us? Are we not important? And it was completely unintentional, but then I was on the back foot when to try and when I kind of got to that point, saying, right now I'm going to focus on you guys. Oh, well, now's your time, is it? Now, right now you're going to do it. And I felt really guilty about it. Is that was a real takeaway as a learning that you need to. It's not about necessarily playing favourites, but it's when you're but treating everyone the same way, level playing field when you first start out. So or at least sharing why you're focusing on a particular area at that particular point. And I probably didn't do that enough when I took this role on.
Mm.
What about other people? Have anyone experienced kind of these, where you kind of kicked yourself thinking I should have done that differently?
I've the first three leadership roles that I had were from internal promotion. And I certainly the first two I got very badly wrong because going from being a peer with the team to being the leader of the team is remarkably difficult. And because I'm, a personable person, I got on well with everyone in the team. I made an assumption, therefore, that I would immediately get their respect as their leader. Um, And what I hadn't really understood was the jealousy, the frustration, the poor feeling that there was then within the team, and probably broke trust by being too hurt by that perceived rejection personally, rather than recognizing what was going on for them and really leaning into it. Um, and that took some time. I can think particularly one person in each of those two teams and two situations that was so focused on what it meant for me and how I was going to um, assert's probably too strong a word, but be able to take on that leadership mantle and move it forward, having not been in many leadership roles before, really underestimating the negative motivational impact that I had on those people.
How long did you
And that didn't feel great
I
afterwards.
was going to say, did it take long, Sarah, to kind of turn it around? What sort of things do you do to turn it around?
Yeah, so the first one, it was very much I realized that this is weird, let's sit down and have a conversation about it. With the other, the person literally wouldn't talk to me, and would actively undermine and really played the game to make life very, very difficult. Um, and I ended up moving into a different team because I couldn't tolerate what was happening. I was in my 20s at this point and certainly I didn't have the emotional intelligence then to be able to handle it well. And I had the opportunity to take a sideways move, so I ran away from the problem. Um, and interestingly, I'm still connected with that person to a certain extent and seeing, that there's still a tentative energy between us even 30 years later, or best part of 30 years later. So yeah, I would say running away into a different role probably isn't the way to go. But yeah, just having that really honest, vulnerable conversation. I screwed up. I'm sorry. You hate me right now, and that's not comfortable. How can we work this through? Giving them deputy opportunity I felt because I was like, well, you're my deputy, Mo. And she's like, yeah, you're giving me your scraps. Like that's not okay. Whereas if I'd had a conversation about, you are my trusted second, this is how we can work together, it would have felt very different.
Yeah, I think the word, empathy comes out loud and clear there. Putting yourself in the person's shoes and thinking, okay, how might I feel in this situation? Because
Yeah.
it's when you're taking on a new role, inheriting a team, there's a million and one things to think about,
Mm,
and having that remembering that everyone is an individual, and you have to spend time and need to spend time, not have some word, need to spend time with everyone to get to know them,
mm,
understand what they need, how they might be feeling is key. Brad,
mm.
Ian, any thoughts? Have you ever kind of unintentionally damaged trust early on in your leadership career when you've taken on the team?
Do you want to go in?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Do you know? I think some of this stems from people's intention to give you a bit of a head start. So you might sit down with your manager and they'll say, "Oh, okay. So let me tell you about your team you're taking on," and they'll say, "So this person, they're really good. They can be super trusted. This person, bit of a challenge, and therefore, certainly in those earlier roles, I kind of went in there and I didn't give them a chance. I'd been given like a cookie cutter judgment on
Yeah,
all, and therefore you end up sort of repeating the personality failures of the previous managers because you're being led down a certain road, and that ends up with new favourites just with a different manager. So yeah, I certainly, looking back now, know that I should have spent time with people and made my own decisions on what was going on, and that the what I learned from that was being able to start with a blank piece of paper with people and just talking about it being an opportunity for us to um, decide the relationship we wanted, rather than having just carrying on what was going on before it. So I certainly in some of my early management roles, and of course as a new manager, thinking what I had to do was be really serious quite kind of suit and tie, and really kind of creating that separation. And my behavior had to change because now I was a manager. So combining all of that stuff with prejudging people certainly meant that my early teens, or I just cringe when I think back to some of my early roles actually, and how just the mistakes you end up making as a result.
But we all learn from them, don't we? Because it's the development path, absolutely. And I think
Exactly.
what you said there about by sports style interviewing the new manager who've been taken on a football club. No, everyone's got an opportunity to prove themselves. It's you're trying to have that starting point. It's a blank bit of paper, absolutely. That everyone's got the opportunity to kind of step up and um, demonstrate their own capabilities.
Mm.
When you're in an organization, though, the challenge is that people come with reputations, potentially, and
Yeah,
that perception, that halo effect or horns effect, in some cases, can actually play through.
yeah,
And being able to have that strength and conviction. So actually, I'm not going to listen to the naysayers or the positive sayers. They'll say it's back to front, but the yays and the nays. You've
yeah,
got to making your own decisions and taking your own call on things gives you is an extremely strong thing you need to do.
yeah,
Mm.
And again, that's for me, that's a foundation on which you can build trust. Because things actually, yeah, they listened. They took me at face value and got to know me, and suddenly that's where you discover the hidden gems people who have
Mm.
been overlooked in the past.
And you've touched on a really important point there around all of our biases. You will naturally prefer and gravitate to people who are more similar to you. Like you say, the halo and the horns effect, all of these biases. And I think when you're starting a new role, and particularly if you're inheriting a new team, endeavoring to ensure that those biases are as conscious and you're as aware of them as you can possibly be so that you can adjust and adapt for them is really crucial. You'll inherit a team, and somebody in the team will remind you of somebody from a previous organization who was brilliant or dreadful. It's really hard to overcome that if you're not aware of it.
Yeah, it's a really really good point, and it happens in interviews
Ian's
all the
grinning.
happens in interviews too.
Completely.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad, what are your thoughts on that? Any comments?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can remember a time I joined a company from a smaller company to a larger company, and I joined this larger company at a time when it was quite tumultuous. There was a bit of historical change that was going on, some problems that were being dealt with, and I had to join in sort of halfway and sort of get to grips with this, and it was my responsibility to sort of lead that, and I did cause through my natural enthusiasm to want to get to the nub of the problem, and deal with the problems and get to grips with it all. I kind of uh, got a few people's backs up. Um, One who was a equal colleague, and one that was sort of slightly more junior, and for different reasons, and one person made it a little bit difficult for me in the early months, but it's interesting because I now count that person as a friend, as a good friend. So. And the way I turned that, or the way we turned that around, because it wasn't just me, it was both of us really, was actually getting to know each other and in understanding the similar parts of us. There were also and appreciating the vast differences between us as well. So we're very different characters in lots of ways, but ultimately we're united in a joint output, and that we both wanted this exactly the same thing for customers, for the business, and wanted to do things properly. We had totally different ways about getting to it, getting to that end goal. But so it was interesting to think about that actually when you started talking and think back sort of so many years ago and think about how that actually happened and my own part to play in that and how we turned that around and now I now count that person as a friend. It's interesting how you can go that full circle.
Yes,
Um, yeah.
but you had to work at it by the sounds of it. It wasn't just
Yeah,
a switch.
yeah, it wasn't instant. It took some time, and there was probably a bit of a standoff for quite a while, I think, between us. The more junior colleague, I accepted it was my fault. I'd been too bull at the gate. I'd been too, um, um, I'll say rough, but just too abrasive, I suppose, in my attempts to get the work done and get the change made and improvements made, and I hadn't taken enough into consideration. And I think, and this is an interesting thing that I've learned from this opportunity here. I took on board before I started was about assimilating with a sort of the culture of the business as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd taken the opportunity to join a business as at a senior leadership position, a business that I valued the ethics and the morals and the code of the company, and then I also then wanted to make sure that I appealed to the members of the staff, because I want to see their point of view as well, and and I guess this work it picks up with the sort of the old-fashioned sort of the borderline of not being friends with people you got to manage, but it's the flip side of that is that I now believe, and I have for a while, but that I can engage with people and be show them enough of me that they want to know more about me, and I also want to know more about them. That doesn't obscure me from actually seeing the problems within that dynamic, that team. If I still see something, I can still be objective about how I deal with those people, and it just means you have to be a bit more frank and honest with people when you're praising some of the problems. I addressed one of the senior colleagues a couple of days ago, and I'd stripped out some part of their remit, which they actually I think were quite actually happy to relinquish, and I was just frank about that. I didn't think that was their best skill set to deal with that part of their remit. And they openly admitted that and went, yeah, actually, it's a fair comment, actually. So sometimes you do things because you can see it, and when you point it out to them, if you point it out to them in the correct way, they can actually see it as a bit of a blessing as well, and so you could go, well, the net result is we're all happy actually, because now I can put that with someone, I keep talking about round pegs in round holes and square pegs in square holes. Is a thing I go back to, because if you're trying to get people to do the wrong thing for them, then you're going to get the wrong kind of output, really. But
Completely agree. Completely agree.
Yeah,
And
getting the right people on the right seats of the bus is absolutely vital, isn't it?
yeah,
and once in that situation, once you build that trust up with an individual, that you can have those conversations, you can start to say, actually, I think from what I'm seeing, your skill set might be better suited, parts of the skill set might be better suited here and all that particular piece of activity because it's someone else because that's better fit there. So it comes back down to trust then. So how do you what does trust actually look like when it comes to taking on a new team? How do you develop that trust? Because that sounds like there's an ongoing theme here about communications and openness that we're talking about, and that how does kind of trust manifest itself on a day-to-day basis in a team environment?
for me, I think a lot of it's got to do with if people actually believe in what your values are and your ethics. I think if they trust in, if they believe what you're telling them in your your value judgments are, then they find it easier to trust that person, because they either assimilate to that or they pull away from that. Can I go, yeah,
Yeah.
it's nothing to do with me. We're completely different. We want different outcomes. If I was not looking after customers, customer value, and they were like, no, I'm all customer. I'm all customer. I can't ever get on board with anything. So then that would be a big problem. That they wouldn't want to trust me. Um, but if I guess if they feel that they see themselves in you, that helps as well, doesn't it? They
It
see,
does. What I'm hearing is the word that comes to mind is authenticity. That
yeah,
you're being authentic, you're being consistent. You mentioned about assimilating with the values of the company, the culture of the company. That you're going in there to try and not to necessarily to upset everything. You might well be some individual might want to completely transform a company, but you're trying to find a company ideally that you fit with, and vice versa. I think you understand what you said, Brad, about to understand the values of the individuals in that company and how that demonstrates. If it jars and it clashes, building that trust is going to be far more of a challenge.
Mm,
And that person, that colleague I mentioned that we had the problem with initially with, um, we ended up in a bar at about 1 a.m. On a team building exercise. Um, uh, we're out in Weston-super-Mare, and I remember just looking at that person, and we were talking and whatever throughout the evening and whatever, and a drop or two of alcohol had been consumed. But I remember thinking how far we'd come from where we used to be to where we were. You know, we have those moments. And then we both acknowledged that. So it was quite special from a trust perspective.
mm,
Um, I don't think you'd be able to say that to each other unless you had trust in them. You know,
mm. Yeah. And to
weird.
be in Weston-super-Mare in a bar at 1 in the morning, you're going to have had some alcohol about 5 miles down the road from where I am. So
It was a beach cleaning exercise that we did as a team. But
amazing.
obviously there's a team meeting before, and then curry night out and everything, and then drinks. But yeah, and then to top it all off, I had mysteriously had picked up COVID, and so everyone that came back in the car with me all got COVID. So
Oh no.
So you shared the love with the team, Brad. Like it, brilliant. So I'll
yeah,
ask I'll
yeah.
ask I'll ask one final question then, and it is based around trust. And so if you were going back to your first yourself when you were taking your first leadership role, what advice would you give yourself about building trust when you were in a team that you inherited potentially? Shall I go back? Shall I start with Ian? Let's go to Ian. Go on.
Um, I think it just picking up what Brad said, really. I think it's setting out your stall. So for me, it's about, I'm somebody that loves collaboration. So I'm all about this is our vision, this is our objective, this is what we are going to do together. Um, and to do that, you've got to get people involved at the beginning,
Yeah.
as you're bringing things together. So it's about telling people as much of that as possible. Then it's following it up and doing it and making sure there's plenty of examples where you do that thing so that you can kind of say, right, okay, this is how I said I would do things, and then here's what we're actually doing. And another thing, picking up on what Brad said about, being really clear with people about why you're making a decision, just not having any bullshit. Because I've definitely suffered with that in the past because you think you're helping people, you think you're being sensitive, and actually you're not helping them at all by giving them a wishy-washy reason why you're taking some work off them or why they didn't get a job. I think it's being compassionate, but being really clear, giving specific examples on what's going on, and just being honest with people. But not using honesty as a battering ram, I suppose, and just, well, hey, I'm just being honest, because that's a bit of a bugbear of mine. But yeah, it's just making sure, walk away from the management jargon. Don't be a, a BS merchant. And yeah, just following up with things and being having lots of examples of honesty.
Mm,
I agree. I agree. Any final
mm.
thoughts from yourself, Brad? So around sort of
Uh,
what advice you give yourself?
um, I don't know what advice I'd give myself because when I look at my first roles in management, I was so poorly prepared for it. So um, it's I feel like I've come a distance. I'd never judge myself as how far I've come, but that's for others to judge. But the phrase I trot out to people now, and I've nicked it from some film. I can't remember which film it is, but this is show business. This is not show friends. This is show business. So when I'm
I
when
like
I'm
it.
trying to get people um, to get to grips with what the task is, whatever, and it may be a bit harsh on people or whatever, but I use that phrase, and that kind of tends to soften it, and they people snigger and laugh at that or whatever. It tends to soften the blow a bit. So, but yeah, I think in terms of giving my advice to myself, to my younger self would be just being authentic. I think you use that word, Gavin, and that's something I think I've learned over time, specifically over the last handful of years. I've learned to be a lot more authentic, and that's my natural happier state. I think I'm a happier person when I can be me. And people talk about being me at work and everything, and I'm quite a vanilla kind of person in terms of many other categories of complications in life. Being able to talk about being myself and be a little bit flamboyant at work, and let people see that is sort of, that's me. That's my natural state, I think. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. And I'll get a Sarah to finish the session. So, what advice would you give to young Sarah? Sarah.
So young Sarah definitely needed to realise that discussion, dissent, and questions within the team were a positive. When you've got a team who feel comfortable enough to go, I disagree, I think it's this, have we thought about that? That actually is to be nurtured and celebrated, not clamped down upon. I found that very hard in the early stages of leadership, which is probably why I'm so passionate now about building psychological safety in teams. So I think that will be the prime piece of advice. You don't need to have all the answers. It is okay for people to question you. And those discussions are where the absolute gold of innovation can come.
I agree. I agree. That's fantastic. Well, look, there were some really key themes here, and I've been scribbling frantically as I always do. Some of the key words that have come out today. So, the key things I've taken from say is that when you're inheriting a team, when you're building a team, or taking a team forward, things like openness and transparency are key. Communicate and over communicate. Be authentic. Um, you said about Ian about being straight and being compassionate, but also being explicit, calling stuff out, but doing it in the right way with the right spirit, and being very intentional about it is key. But the key message overall is around building trust and the amount of effort and time and that it takes to build trust, but the benefits of it. If you get a trusting group and build trust individuals, as I said, you can build, say, friends and colleagues for life, which is great. And that's what we're trying to do here, you're trying to take those early life experiences throughout your career. So really good discussion. Thank you so much for today. Really appreciate it. I'll hand back to you, Sarah, to close, I guess, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. I've really enjoyed that. We could, like, as ever, talk for 2 or 3 hours rather than one, and I'm aware of time. So wanted to thank you for your time, Brad. It's been really nice to have a conversation with you and get to know you. Hopefully, people
Thanks for
watching
having me.
this on catch up will gain something from it as well. And yeah, future leaders, we're here to help. If you are a new leader and looking for a mentor, or if you would love to share your experiences in leadership with people who are newer in their leadership journey, then we'd love to hear from you. And we'll be back in about a month's time with our next roundtable. And I should know what it is, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So I'll add it into the notes when I put this online.
Brilliant.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Thanks, Phil.
everybody.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.